All right. I am super excited to introduce to you guys Jade Wolf today. She's someone I met just recently, just last week actually. So not that long ago. I had like once we talked, I just knew we had to talk. We had to do some content, and I had to get some of her secrets on how she's able to get her clients such good sales results. So we're going to be talking about sales for property managers, something that a lot of property managers struggle with, something I think is very universal. And Jade Wolf has literally helped build the sales processes at Vacasa and Vintory. So two of the biggest names in property management. So if anybody knows, Jade knows. So I'm excited. And Jade, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm stoked. So I would love it if you would just walk us through a little bit your origin story, essentially, where, how did you get into the short-term rental space originally? And then just walk me through those experiences you've had.
Sure. Well, I don't know how far back to go, but I actually got my taste of vacation rentals in my hometown outside of Yosemite National Park. You know, the little mom and pop outfit there. I was a housekeeper, and then I did some reservations. I got my sister hired, and, it was kind of just a fun thing to do when I was a teenager. And then, life moves on. Eventually, I moved to Portland, Oregon, and I started working for a little startup called Vacasa. So I was one of their early hires. They only managed about 2,000 properties at that time, and by the time I left, it was 30,000. So I was part of their explosive growth, and it was a really fun time to really be in vacation rentals. It was kind of turning from the Wild West into something a lot more structured. And then I met Brooke at Vintory when he was starting the company, and he convinced me to join him. And he tempted me with the idea of remote work, and I'm a mountain lover, so I was like, yes, I am gonna do this. And it was a really good move. He was a great mentor, and after 6 years, I've decided to strike out on my own.
Wow, that's really, really cool. And especially the fact that you did sales both for property managers. I mean, you've had the experience yourself, and then you got into Vacasa, and then you helped with the property management company, and then you helped with inventory selling property managers. You have so many different angles of the short-term rental space specifically, and I think that's really, really valuable because there's lots of marketing people, like I'm in marketing, lots of marketing people everywhere, tons of agencies, tons of consultants, whatever. But you have experience specifically in the short-term rental space that like almost nobody else can really like come close to. And so that's why I'm super, super excited. So one of the things I would love to ask and dig into a little bit is what did you learn at Vintory? Well, yeah. So your experiences at Vacasa versus Vintory, how did
Yeah.
those differ?
Oh, very different. Being on the front lines of very busy sales process was very enlightening because I spoke with thousands of owners during the time there, answering the phone for interested owners all over the country. So if they were interested in speaking further, I would set an appointment for the business development rep that was in that market. If we didn't have a rep in that market, I would go for the close. And we helped a lot of people in that short time. I helped build out a team of 10 people by the time I left to do that. Yeah, it was very much, the sales process as your regular vacation rental management company would know it. And then Vintory was the first company to be the antidote really to Vacasa, to help the managers have sales and marketing that big companies could afford. So it was just a nice way to level the playing field, and it was really wonderful to help so many small companies stay in the business.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's just so unique. That experience is just so cool. And I'm going to say that like a million times. I know I'm going to oversay that. But when you look at property managers, I kind of want to start off with this as well. When you talk with property managers, what's like the number one problem you see? What's the biggest thing that's missing from their sales processes, or the most common that you see with property managers?
Well, that they don't have a sales process would be probably the first thing that I notice. Or they confuse retail with sales, and they don't really understand like the process, how to do it well, and that's why they're struggling. So to give them that training and to help them have those aha moments and really utilize a CRM system, which is absolutely key for any salesperson. If you really want to, be at the top of your game, that's like your second brain. That's your book of business. And you really want to be able to use it well, not just use it as an address book. So between not really understanding sales and not using a CRM system, those are the things that I noticed the most.
So what do you mean when you said retail versus like sale? Can you explain a little bit more what you mean by that? Like
Love to.
confusing the two?
Yeah, I wrote an article about this some time ago because it's so prevalent. When you're doing marketing, a company like Vintori helping the phones to ring, and then the manager says, well, those weren't good leads. And it's like, well, what do you mean? They called, they were interested. Well, they weren't ready to sign up. Well, this is not the kind of, it's a product, there's a difference between a product and selling a service. So, an owner who has a home is going to want to find out a lot more before they sign up. They're really going to want to make sure that they're in a good partnership. So you have to work the lead. Working leads is called that for a reason. So when they think, well, nobody's calling just to sign up, it's not that sort of transaction. So that's one of the reasons that I would like to do sales training, is to help them realize that no one, well, I would say no one, very rarely will anybody call and say, sign me up. It's sales, which means you really have to look at it as a process, and you have to do diligent follow-up, and you could lose their confidence at any stage in that sales process. So really understanding where those pitfalls are and how to avoid them is really crucial for winning more business.
I love that. It reminds me of a quote from Alex Ramosi. Do you know who Alex Ramosi is? Okay, I'm a bit of a fanboy, so I'll share as much as you want about Alex Ramosi after this if you want. But he's just a business guru. Basically, the most important thing you could do is have an offer. So it's like when somebody doesn't, like if somebody picks up the phone to call you, the best case scenario is like, I just want to sign up. And usually that's either one of two things. Either that's the offer is just amazing, meaning like it just makes sense. There's urgency, there's scarcity, and you've played on all these factors perfectly. So where they pick up the phone and they're ready, which is extremely tough. And part of that then is marketing too. You have to have like amazing marketing for people to just be ready, like pick up the phone. Even the best marketing systems often don't produce that kind of response, right? Just people who are ready and picking up the phone immediately. So that's where he says that offer, if you have an amazing offer, but you're working on it, but the offer is not perfect, then go to sales and then work on sales. And if sales, you got sales as far as you could, then go to marketing, right? And so you're kind of there in the middle, which is like the offer's still super important, but then you got to be able to close them. When they jump on the call, they have a few objections, they're worried. It's like you're there to help them make that decision. And I think that's really cool.
Absolutely. But also they're judging how professional you are every step of the way. So you have to be aware of that. You need to answer the phone when it rings. You have to answer with proper company greeting. I've done a lot of call scoring, which I help reps improve, and answer with just hello. And that's my pro tip today on LinkedIn. If you look at it, it doesn't matter if they call your business number or through your call tree, you should still answer with your name and your company to just inspire that confidence and start strong. Have a great first impression. Sometimes you only get one crack at an owner, so you really want to make sure that you're on your A game from the very beginning.
Yeah, that makes sense, because they're judging how you're going to be with their guests too. Right? If you can't communicate with them, how are you going to be a good communicator with their guests? So right. Yeah, that's great. So can you walk us through what are, like, before we jump into like specifics, like the scripts and like how to close and things like that, let's like walk me through the stages like that you help your clients with, which is, somebody calls or somebody becomes a lead, somebody joins the call, and then what happens after the call. So what are the sales stages you typically see that like what buckets do you put these stages in, and how do you talk about those with your property managers?
Yeah, so first it's important to know what kind of sales team that you're working with. Sometimes it's one business development representative that's doing everything. But often the best approach is to have like an appointment setter trained to take the call, because they're going to be the most like responsive person, where a business development representative might be in the field, doing walkthroughs, not the most available person. So, I help them train whoever's going to be answering the phone, make sure that they've really got some good best practices. I have a whole science when it comes to the owner discovery call, and then getting them to next steps. If an appointment setter can get that appointment on the calendar of the business development representative with some great information, address, specs of property, have they rented before, is it currently a rental? Those type of things can really help the closer to learn more about the property, get an income projection ready, and have a really strong call with that owner. And the owner doesn't feel like their time is wasted. And it really inspires confidence. So it depends on, if I'm training somebody who's doing everything A to Z, or if I'm training somebody who's the appointment setter. which is not that common, and I'm trying to make that more common. Have an appointment setter. Really, really great way to make sure that you start with this tight process. And then, once we have that, a CRM can be that visual guide to your sales process. So we need to have those beginning stages, new lead, the lead definition, someone who's expressed interest. Were you able to speak to them, answer their questions? Were you able to get to next steps, appointment? Or if you got the appointment, say it's the business development representative, the appointment may be the home walkthrough, or even a review of the income projection or an owner contract together. So you really want to get it to those next steps as soon as possible, and just avoid everything you can to slow things down. They're interested, they're hot. You don't want them to cool off. You don't want to be like, well, let me send you some information. Go ahead and review that. Give me a call back with your questions. Like, there's so many ways you can really douse the fire of a hot lead. So just helping go over what are the stages, keep it simple, keep it moving, and be ready to overcome objections, because I always say sales doesn't start until someone says no. Right? It's just education up to that point.
Yeah, 100%. The setter, that's one thing I think people forget a lot about is having a setter. And a lot of people aren't at the size where they can have somebody specifically for setting. Even if you don't have somebody for that role specifically, that means whoever is doing sales needs to be doing those things really well. And I liked what you said about you don't want to let them cool off. I see that all the time. They're most interested, when they see an ad or they see your mailer or your, the email that caught their attention goes out, and they're interested, and so they reach out. And then if you respond like a couple days later, they've completely forgotten what it's about or what it's for. They have to like remember. And I do this all the time on like LinkedIn. I'll see somebody that like, hey, comment this to get my whatever blueprint, and I'll comment, and then like 2 weeks later I'll get sent it on LinkedIn, and I'll have forgotten completely what I commented. I'll be like, why are you sending me this random PDF? I don't want it. And I have to like revisit why in the first place I even reached out. And so I think that's a big key people forget, is that there's a moment in time where they're interested, and you've got to capitalize on it.
Right. And you can train your reservations and office staff to set an appointment, might as well, because often when I'm secret shopping, they will say, oh, okay, what's your name and number? We'll have someone call you back. And then I track the response time, and, they might call a day later, a week later, or never. So it's either that person who took my message got busy and didn't pass it on, or the person that they gave it to got busy and didn't call back. But if I'm the owner, that doesn't inspire confidence.
100%.
And another point I'd like to make is that person who received your mailer and is now interested might have not been interested before, but if they can't immediately, move through your sales process, they're going to they're going to start shopping around. They're going to call 5 other managers. They're going to hit it off with someone else. And then by the time you get back to them, they're going to be like, oh, never mind. I'm good. And then you don't really know why they say they're good when they initially expressed interest. That's why.
Yeah, that's fair. Because I do that too sometimes. Like I'll see something interesting, I'll reach out, and then I'll just start doing like YouTubing stuff and looking it up and Googling it and finding resources, and then I get it answered, and then I'm like, okay, cool. And then they reach out 24 hours later. I'm like, I'm good. So yeah, absolutely. I think speed to lead is one of the most important things you could possibly do from a setter perspective, because that's the low hanging fruit, right? People reaching out to you, whether it's through SEO or through ads, whatever, people reaching out to you, that's what you got to capitalize on.
Absolutely.
And then there's the other part too, which is they reach out, you book a call, but then there's also sales after that first initial call, right? Because sometimes they need to think about it. Maybe you're not the best at closing, right? And so you have to have some sort of follow up afterwards. What would that look like? What do you try and get your property managers to do after the first initial call if they can't close?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of making sure the follow up is up to us, because if you pass the ball to the owner, they got a million things they're juggling, they're going to drop it, right? So it's our job to follow up and to say, okay, I'm going to prepare this rental projection. Let's go ahead and schedule time to review it together, and be ready for them to say, no, just email it. Oh, you have to be ready to say, this is a conversation, or some things you could do to make more income. I would really love to just discuss it over a call before I send it. It'll just put the numbers into better context. And, you can pitch that a lot of different ways to an owner, but you have to sell the value of the next step, because if you don't do that, if they're saying they don't need it, it's because you didn't do a good job building the value around the next step. So you always have to phrase it, it's in their best interest, because everybody's impatient, everybody's thinking what's in it for me. So if you're like, I would really love it if we could go over this together, there you phrased it, it's for you. And as much as they seem nice, they're not that motivated to do something for you. So you always have to phrase it, it's up to them. Like, hey, your time is very important, and I want to make sure we're not playing phone tag with your questions about this projection. So let's just go ahead and set aside a little time to go over it together, and then I'll email it afterwards, because that gives you another opportunity to build rapport. Because what separates you from somebody else who they're also shopping around with? If you have more chance to, chit chat with them and find out, hey, you went to the same college, or you both have 2 kids, or find some common ground, that'll take you a lot further in your competition.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. And it's hard to close. Like, you have to talk with them. You can't, like, I assume it's extremely rare to close a property owner without actually talking with them. And I would be worried from someone who's, I'm in the marketing field. There's a lot of scammers out there, like in marketing, in a lot of fields really, but marketing especially. And so, like, when I don't see a client, like I don't see them face to face, or like maybe a vendor, if I don't see them or talk with them, oftentimes they're not the best client or the best vendor. I mean, owners themselves, like, they're not going to really trust you if they don't talk with you, because it's their property they're giving you a lot of the times, the smaller owners.
Yeah, going back and forth on text or email is a great way to kill your sales process. There's just too much time in between. There's no rapport being built, and usually they just want the numbers. They're like, "Hey, what's your fee?" And they try to like grind you down on your management fee, and you don't have a chance to build value, because the antidote to somebody grinding you down on price is building value. And it is a relationship. You want to make sure that that owner is going to be a good fit for you, and how would you know unless you talk to him on the phone? So I'm a huge fan of just keeping it old school, phone calls and video calls. Try to avoid text and email unless it's to propose a time to get on a call or pass along information that you already went over on a call.
Yep, I like that. I was actually talking with Cody Wood a little while back, before the new year actually, and we were talking, and he said that basically the quality of the company is based on the quality of the clients. So like, if you only have owners that are very hands-on and very needy and like low revenue, your entire business, even if you have 100 listings or 200, 300 listings, it's still going to be very razor thin margins. You're going to be very stressed, and you're going to have constant fires you're putting out, no matter how good your systems are, because your clients are just not good clients. And so I like thinking that way too, which is not, oh, it's a sales call, I got to close. Like, is this a good client as well? Are they at the revenue level that is right for our mission? Is this somebody that we can actually help? Are they going to be a good fit, or are they going to be a nightmare for us? And I think that helps separate kind of the players in this field from the amateurs. The amateurs getting started, which is they have to take everyone, and the players are taking the right owners and the right clients. And you can't really tell unless you get on a call. Still, unfortunately. I mean, AI is pretty good, but it's still not quite there.
I don't think AI will ever take salesperson's job. I mean,
Right.
especially with high dollar sales, they want to talk to somebody. They want to talk to a person. And law of attraction, you're going to attract what you are. So if you're desperate and you're taking anything, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get anything. So you really want to be deliberate and methodical about, the kind of portfolio that you build, the kind of owners that you work with, and just say, it's okay to say no. Just make sure that they know that you have to choose them just as much as they choose you. And that really shifts the dynamic in that sales call.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to get a little bit more in the weeds too, like a little bit more specifics too, because I feel like property managers, especially property managers that are just getting started, or let's say less than 50 listings, going back to a CRM, because we can have all the sales processes, we can have the salespeople, but if the CRM isn't in place and it's not set up right, like even if it is in place but it's not set up right, then basically what you're doing is you're getting all, you might be having a good flow of leads, but it's just a leaky bucket. They're falling by the wayside. You're forgetting who you talk to. So what specifically for CRMs, is there a specific CRM system that you recommend? Or is it like based on the size of the property management company? Like what do you typically recommend for clients?
Yeah, well, as you know, I'm a big fan of Vintory because that's what I have the most experience with, but it was built specifically for this purpose for vacation rental managers. So it's been customized to be exactly what you need. But, looking at all the different CRMs that people are using and trying to help them with it, it's really shows what is lacking. You want to have a system that will call up the contact when somebody calls so that you can access their, not just their name, but their notes quickly. We know how conversations go with owners. They go on vacation, they could come back a month later and want to pick things up. But if you ask them to jog your memory, they get annoyed. They feel like they're not important, they're not memorable, and you're not professional. So at least if you have a CRM where you're running all your leads through it, you're making your calls and your emails through it, when that person resurfaces, in an instant, you can see where you left off with them, and you could say, "Oh, hey Bob, last time we talked, you were going to Costa Rica. How was that?" And then you're starting from a really warm place, you're building rapport, and then you can say, "Oh, okay, so your property, last we spoke, you're doing some renovations while you're on vacation. How'd that go? Is it ready for me to come do the walkthrough?" You can really just pick up where you left off. So your CRM does that for you. And most people are not using it in that way. They're just using it as an address book. And they don't keep notes. They're like, "Oh, I have all the notes in my head." Well, that doesn't help you scale, and that doesn't help you train new teammates. It's a best practice to make sure that you're putting your notes where you left off, what your next steps are. Yeah, you just want to be able to just never miss a beat, because it doesn't matter how good you are at memorizing, it's not going to help you scale.
Okay, I like that. And obviously Venturi, I mean, that makes sense if they have a CRM. Actually shows you how much I know about Venturi. I'm really glad we're having this conversation. I'm more familiar with a lot of their other offerings. Their CRM I'm a little bit less familiar with. What specifically about their CRM really helps with the getting more owners? Like what specifically, how is it tailored for that case?
Yeah, well, they're a marketing powerhouse, and they have spent a lot of time putting together the right data and the right process to get to the owners. So, we had a huge marketing team, data team. I don't plan to know much about exactly how they make the meal. I just know it's delicious. I'm just like on the sales side trying to help people, use the tool. And, it's for nothing if you can get the phone to ring. And this is what I found so much. And I've talked to other companies that say the same. It doesn't matter how much we get the phone to ring. If somebody can't close it, if they don't understand how to use the CRM to run a tight sales process, they think we're not doing our jobs and they cancel. So, and then also these CRMs, because Ventori, is the one I'm the most familiar with, but there are others that do the same, will automate your follow-up workflows. So you don't need AI, you just need a couple of bots to, hold on to your email templates, send them out in the right order to the right type of lead. And you don't have to do so much manual work if you just rely on some of these features. If somebody's unresponsive, you drop in an unresponsive deal stage, and they can go through a whole journey as long as you plan it, getting an email or getting a text and staying top of mind to make it easy for them to resurface. 99% of people are not using those follow-up features.
Gotcha. The nurture sequences that get them back and engaged and remember why they reached out in the first place, or why they requested the information or whatever it was.
Totally.
That's awesome. I love that. For property managers who do the sales themselves, which is a lot of them, right? It's the rule of 80-20, right? 20% of the property managers have 80% of the properties, and then 80% of the property managers have 20%. So there's a lot of smaller property managers out there that are doing the sales themselves. And one of the toughest things they deal with is objections when people do call and they do answer. Maybe their sales process isn't perfect because they're a one-man show, but they do get some people to the call, and then they come up with roadblocks. There's objections that happen. Let's start with, what are some of the most common objections that you have seen that property managers should be prepared for? And then as a follow-up to that would be, how do you recommend they overcome those?
Right. So, of course, the most common is your fee is too high, and it doesn't matter if your fee is $1, someone's going to say it's too high. So you have to be ready to build value. I see a lot of people that race to the bottom. Well, we can discount our fee or what have you, but that's going to hurt you every month that your fee is discounted. Just be ready with some really great signing bonuses and incentives, because everybody wants to feel like they're getting a good deal. So, you can have that up your sleeve. But you really need to know your competition, know what they're charging and what for, because often they'll say, "Well, I'm thinking of going with such and such company, and they're just a little cheaper than you." And if you knew that, oh, well, they also charge you several $100s a year for their linen program, and we don't charge for linens, that can really help them see it differently. So that's why secret shopping is good. There's nothing wrong with, elevating the industry with, just knowing each other's service offering. You have to just be ready to sell your relationship and just help them understand that, what you're getting is a really great team. You're not getting an out-of-town company. You're getting responsiveness, somebody who knows you and not you as a number. So you just have to be ready for, what are those things that make your company unique, or, why, if you were in their shoes, should you sign? It's not all about the money. It's not all about the numbers. And I often like to ask people about, Do you buy the cheapest shoes or the cheapest phone? I bet you don't. I bet you buy the thing that's the best fit for you. So I want to focus on, the fit for the relationship. Would you agree that the best
Mhm.
deal is best value and not lowest price? So some of those things, that's how you get your confidence in sales, is preparing for these objections. And every gig I've ever had, I try to write down every objection and then I journal out like 3 to 5 responses to that. So I'm prepared ahead of time when that comes up. And, because otherwise you can only get confidence from a lot of interaction and a lot of experience. And a lot of smaller companies are just not having enough people call on a daily basis to stay sharp. So journaling is key, not so much scripts because everybody can tell you're reading a script. But when I do my training, I have a whole manual and a workbook, and we do the journaling exercises. And it really helps that sit in your long-term memory. When you write something down, it's accessed quicker in your long-term memories versus just reading somebody else's script in a book.
So what is your, I mean, we just talked a little bit about scripts, but what is your thoughts on scripts in general and whether teams should abide by the, like some companies swear by the scripts. That's, you follow the script to the rule book. Other companies hate scripts, have absolutely nothing to do with them, which has its own set of problems. Where do you lie there? And then what have you found that works?
Well, it's fine. A script is fine if you can memorize it, but if you sound like you're reading it, that's terrible, right? That's not, I mean, it's still better than talking to an AI, but if you want to, really feel confident, the journaling process is much more effective because you understand it. You're able to access that information more readily than reading it, and it's just a good practice of putting something in your own words. So with my
Hmm.
exercises, it's like, here's some examples of what I would say. Now, go ahead and write 3 versions in your own words of what you would say. So I give them the examples of my tried and true talk tracks that have worked over the years, but I also encourage them, even if they want to say what I say word for word, I still want them to write it out themselves so that it makes it into their memory.
Love that. I love that. What have you found as so is it like a framework when you say journaling? Can you be a little bit more specific about the journaling it out? Is that like you're writing down things that have worked?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a workbook. So
Okay.
again, it's like this is the objection. These are 3 different ways that I would handle it. Now, write 3 versions in your own words of how you would handle it. And it's totally okay to steal all the things that I say, but just change the wording around a little bit, and say it out loud because it might look good on the page, but if you say it out loud and it doesn't flow and it's not like your vibe, it's not going to come off authentically. The
Hmm.
journaling is just more hands-on learning, and most people are better learners hands-on.
Yeah, totally. What when they join the call, do you have like a framework that you typically recommend though? Like for example, there's the classic like closer framework, which is like clarify why they're there, label them with a problem, dig into their pain. I can't remember actually, but there's a lot of frameworks out there. Are there any frameworks that you typically recommend that sales conversations follow, like that you would give to kind of a new salesperson?
Yeah, and this is really great because oftentimes people get off the phone quickly. So you want to get enough information up front for them that you could probably get the next step or do a follow-up. So one of the things besides doing the company greeting is to say, thank you, Sam, for calling today. I'm just going to ask you a few questions so I can better assist you. And then you just start asking your qualifying questions. Kind of the 3 main ones are, do you already have a property? Or are you thinking of buying a property? Because we could go through our whole spiel and find out they don't even have a property, right? So that's a totally different conversation. So it's important to ask that question first. And, in your mind, you're branching like, oh, if they say this, I'm going to go this direction. So they usually will say, oh, I already have a property. Oh, great. Is this property something that you self-manage or is it being managed by a company? Because a self-managed owner is a very different type of owner than one that's being managed by a company. And you should know that right off the bat. And then if they say, oh, okay, if they say, yes, I'm self-managing. Oh, great. If you want to provide your Airbnb link, I can give you some feedback. I can do an income projection. I'll try to get that link. Usually they have it right on their cell phone. They're like, oh yeah, I'll shoot it to you. Bing. And then you've got that bit of information. But also you're thinking, oh, okay, if a self-manager is calling me, they're probably maxed out in their bandwidth and they are looking for some help at this time. You kind of do want to be ready to ask a leading question and not just launch into your value proposition, because we
Yeah.
have very short attention spans. We're all like guppies because of our cell phones. So if you just say, "Oh, let me tell you a little bit about my company," blah, 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 they kind of like just check out and they don't remember any of it. So it's better to say, "Oh, well, what would you like to know about first? How we do our cleaning and screening or how we maximize your revenue?" That also tells you what's important to them. And you're taking notes the entire time. You don't want to, try to circle back and remember these details later. Whether it's a pen and paper or it's your CRM, you should be taking notes. And then, get the address. Usually they volunteer some of the reasons why they're calling, like that they, are ready to make a switch, or they got a mailer and they're just curious. And then be ready to propose next steps. If they have to ask for next steps, you waited a little too long, but it's still okay. Just say, "Hey, I think you'd be really interested in seeing one of our rental projections, or I would love to give you some feedback at your property." Again, it's not like I would love to come see your property. It's like I would love to give you some great feedback about how to maximize your income potential by doing a walkthrough. So now they're like, "Oh, okay, even if I don't sign up with them, I'm still going to get something out of it." But what you get is you get in front of them, you can build rapport, you can earn trust. So you really just want to try to proceed and never think for 1 minute that somebody's not going to sign. Even if they say, "Well, I'm just curious," you just really want to, be ready to take it the entire way, because people change their minds. So, just try to get the main details, the address, what their former or current rental history is, and get the next steps. An appointment setter, that would be appointment, and then just, make sure that you're scheduling that next day after, as close as possible to your initial call. They're like, "Well, maybe we can do it next week. Maybe we can do it in 2 weeks." Clear your calendar, do whatever you can to squeeze them in as soon as possible before they cool off or go shop with somebody else. And
I
never,
see that.
yeah,
Sorry to interrupt, but I see that in marketing as well. So with our ad system, we have people go through they see the ads, they go through the funnel, they get to an appointment where a book appointment page where they can book with the owner. And we have found that the show up rate and the close rate is much higher if you only allow people to book over the next 3 days. If it's longer than 3 days, people will forget and they won't show, or they will show and they'll forget the reason they booked. Or, and so when you limit the time that they can book to the next 3 days, that's the only options. Nobody's going to be booking next week, and it's going to be a lot more. The iron's going to be hot, like you said. They're not going to be as cooled off. So I definitely see what you're
right.
saying there.
Yeah, and usually a scheduling widget that people use have the notifications. So I recommend that there's an email reminder that goes out 24 hours before and a text reminder 1 hour before. And if they miss that, you've got to follow up very quickly and diligently to get them rescheduled, and make sure that the messages that you're leaving are, with that hook. Like, I want to make sure that I give you this helpful information that's going to help you whether you sign up or not. You just want to do whatever you can to keep them interested. And, even if they don't sign up, they might be a great source of referrals. So you just want to
That's
put
true.
every opportunity, everything you got every time.
Yeah, that's key too. I have seen some videos on how some of the highest performing salespeople at various companies are some of the highest selling because they're able to get referrals from their current prospects. And so that widens their inherent lead pool by 30%. And so sometimes they don't even have higher closing percentages, just they're great at getting referrals.
Right.
So yeah,
Say
I
if
see that.
at the end of the whole process they say, "Well, we're just not ready," or "It's just not a fit for us." Hey, no problem. Especially if you know that you did everything that you could. You just say, "Hey, is there anybody that you think could be a fit? I would love to maybe set you up with a referral bonus if you send some referrals this way." And then they're like, they might not do it out of the goodness of their heart, but if you mention that there's some sort of referral bonus, it could definitely tempt them.
Totally, yeah. And another way you could do it is you actually can get them to do it out of the goodness of their heart. If you're like a small business or even moderately sized, you can still say the same thing. You can say, "Hey, as someone here working at a small business, referrals are everything to us. Is there anybody that would be interested in what we offer," something like that. And sometimes the reason even doesn't matter so much that you give a reason, right? The because why, as long as you have one and it's not completely bogus, usually that's enough to get people to at least consider it, is what I found. That's awesome. That's key. I forget about referrals, so I'm glad you reminded me, because now I got to remember that in my sales process.
Yeah, and it's a really good point, Sam. Yeah, you really want to just make sure that you're turning over every rock, and it's asking for the business. The more comfortable you are asking for the business, the more confident you're going to come off of, and they may circle back to you. You're going to leave them feeling positive, and they may a year, 2 years circle back or send somebody your way.
Yeah, 100%. So how early? So, okay, actually, I want to ask just kind of a tactical, specific question, and you can ballpark me on the answer here, but specifically for like the second call. So somebody, let's say they pick up the phone, they call you, they're interested, and you're like, hey, I'll prepare a revenue projection. Let's say that's pretty typical. So then you schedule a second call, they jump on the second call. What is the close rate on average? What is a good close rate? And then like, what is the close rate you would typically shoot for your clients for that second call? And then what is the close rate you see on average? And then what is like, if you're a property manager, when should you know that it's the sales that's your issue? Like when should you know it's because you're not closing? What percentage of closes is that?
Well, I'd say 80% of the next steps should be showing up. Like hopefully, 20%, there's always going to be kind of the reasons why they have to reschedule or what have you. But with good diligent follow-up, you can usually get some of those people back. But when it comes to the very end of the sales process, again, 20% is a very strong close ratio. And it seems low to some people, but if you get a ton of leads, and you really aggregate that, you can say that 20% are the really, really strong ones. People are following up with you, they're responding to you, and they're moving forward. But that's also where your follow-up best practices are key, because those leads are still really valuable. Just because they're not responding today doesn't mean that they won't tomorrow or next month or next year. So, you paid a lot for those leads in that marketing, and you just don't want them just sitting there collecting dust, cyber dust, data dust. You really want to just make sure that they're going through some type of nurture process for several months even. But yeah, when I look at really strong close rates for BD closers, some of them are percent, which is really strong, but that's somebody who's got a lot of experience. They're good at overcoming objections, offering incentives, and hopefully there's some sort of really good offer that went out in the marketing that compelled those people to be more interested than average people. So it's a combination of, the strength of the brand, the offer, and the sales process.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Because especially like urgency and scarcity too, like why should they act now? If you don't have an offer that's like some sort of seasonal offer or a temporary offer, or you don't have some sort of inherent limits to how many people you can onboard, then it just becomes like, we'll reconnect next month. We're a little busy right now. And then it's hard to get them to cross the line. And so there's a lot of those little pieces. It's not necessarily just the closer. Sometimes it's what tools does the closer have to work with. If they only have like charge 20%, we do everything for you, but you could join any time. That's when it gets really hard to close the line now, close the deal, get people over the line. So I see that a lot. I see that a lot with my clients as well. That's something that I help them create offers where that makes people act now. You know what I mean? Makes them more likely.
Urgency and scarcity is absolutely key in sales, and just the twist of the phrase can get you a better result. And I always tell people, pay attention to the offers in your inbox or the commercials that you're hearing, and see how the urgency and scarcity is being worked on you. Or the last time you bought something from an ad, how did that work on you? It is exactly that.
Yep, 100%. Now I want to talk about what you do specifically. Obviously, we've been talking about you do sales, but now you do your consulting. So first of all, who's your perfect client? Who do you help? Who are you looking to help?
I'm looking to help any property manager that needs help with their sales process. I don't do sales myself anymore, except selling myself. I want to teach people how to fish, and I love teaching. I love writing, putting together resources. So, I'm looking for anybody that's looking for coaching, or they're just feeling like they're not growing at the pace that they like to, or they have a new hire. I often train new hires. The manager might not have time to train them, or they just want that salesperson to have a really strong start, which is smart because you're investing a lot in that person. So we do 6 sessions, 1 session a week typically, or we can move them closer together depending on the need. And I just really help that new salesperson to get those CRM best practices, so that the manager, the owner of the company, has the visibility in the leads that they're working, because that's really key to make sure that they're doing what they need to be doing without you asking. And then just, getting them ready for those objections, getting them excited to hustle, because with sales, You really don't really want to be sitting back just waiting for things to come to you when the phone is not ringing, when you're not doing follow-up. Like, what can you do to move the needle? So we also train on some of those things. And yeah, you'd be surprised how many people just get so invigorated and re-energized, even a seasoned rep, by some of the training, because they realize, oh, this is actually, fun. Like, sales can be fun. I always liked it. It's a very adventurous career. You never know who you're going to talk to, and it's a bit of a challenge in it. Yeah, I just try to, give them really good foundation and get them pumped to do sales, because you should stay in that pumped space when you're doing sales, because enthusiasm is a huge seller. And, you want people to resonate at that frequency when you're trying to sell with them. Like, oh, let me tell you why I think, we're such a great company. Or, and then when you're at their home, like, gushing about their home, and like, your home would be perfect on our program because you have this amenity, and, we can position the marketing like this. And so generating that enthusiasm is what's needed. And when I'm doing call scoring for some of the reps that I train, some of the feedback is like, okay, we just need a little more sunshine. We need a little bit more caffeine in your voice. You just got to make sure that you're projecting that, because people are going to also mirror that, whether they know they're not, whether, they know they're smiling when they're talking to you or not. They're going to feel good when they talk to you. They're going to want to talk to you some more. They're going to want to sign up with your company if you leave them feeling good.
100%. So you'd recommend like a white monster or something? You'd say caffeine is a good, that's what honestly, that works really well for me. If I have a day with like a lot of sales calls, sometimes, which does happen, I'll have multiple sales calls with property managers. I've been very blessed. I just need some caffeine. Like, it puts a little bit of pep in my step, makes me smile a little bit faster, it keeps me rolling, and it keeps my brain going. Because sometimes if I have all those sales calls without the caffeine, sometimes my brain starts to melt down. So yeah, that's very helpful.
Is definitely a salesperson's best friend. But so is music. I've got like my pump up jams that I've curated and I've shared with people. If you're driving to work, you've got that music on. If you're having your lunch, or you're, taking a break to do some administrative, just constantly being, in that affirmative space. You want to lean to things that are not just caffeine. If you find that you get energized talking to people, chances are you're going to be good at sales, because you're always kind of jonesing for that next hit of, talking to somebody or getting a close. Or yeah, it's fun. I worked at a car dealership for a while in Portland, Oregon. I ended up being the sales manager of 30 people. And let me tell you, the kind of people that gravitate to car sales are definitely addictive personalities. But that's kind of what it takes to stay driven. Like, you're not just doing it because it's your job. You're doing it because you love it, because you crave it, because you just want to talk to people. So yeah, we could do a whole nother episode of me sharing lots of fun sales anecdotes and stories of things that happen over the years of different gigs. But yeah, I think you got to hire somebody that wants to sell. That's really key.
And with that too, so say there's somebody listening to this saying, hey, I want to hire Jade. Like, this sounds great. What should they do? Like, how do they reach out to you if they're listening to this and like, I think Jade is awesome. We need her now.
Well, I would love that. They can reach me at jade@jadewolfconsulting.com. They can also find me on LinkedIn, send me a message. I would love to jump on a call with them, see if we're a fit, and see what kind of problems they have that I can solve. Or just, maybe they just need some more energy in their sales process, or they need a sales audit to see, where they might be going wrong. Just reach out to me. Free consultations. And if they want to move forward, I'd love to do that. I love working with managers. I love talking to people. And I've always been passionate about sales, and especially creating more salespeople that really understand it, and just helping managers really know what their sales process is doing or not doing for their business.
Awesome. I love that. And I just remembered there was something I wanted. I think a property manager would be very interested to hear this before we finish this off. You have done a study on secret shopped property managers, and you called property managers to, see if people were picking up their phones and responding to leads. Can you just kind of briefly go over that?
Sure.
Like, what did you do? What were the results of that? And what did you find?
Yeah, so it was about 5 years ago, and I called 100 different property managers nationwide, posing as an owner, tracking response rates, and only about 34% of the time did somebody pick up my call and answer my questions. Often I would, super low, and then half of the calls were never returned at all. It was just kind of The entire study is something that I put recently on my LinkedIn if people want to dive into the numbers and the weeds. But I also shopped Vacasa, Turnkey, and Evolve, and they had 100% on response rate and follow-up rate. So it just really proved something that I already knew. It's not these huge companies, these companies have been really successful. It's not that their services are better, their sales process is better. And that's why I want people to understand. You really need to be aware of all the places that you're hemorrhaging money, and mainly it's in your sales process.
Love that. So property managers, if you want to grow, fix your dang sales, fix your dang sales. Sometimes you have plenty of leads. It's not the leads, it's the sales.
Well, even if you only have a few leads, if you can make the most out of those leads, I mean, it's even more important for people that don't have a lot of leads because you may have only a couple at bats and you've got to knock it out of the park every time. You definitely need some sales coaching to make sure that you have every advantage.
Agreed, 100%, 100%. Well, thank you. This has been a pleasure. We already talked about how they can get in contact with you. But I just want to say, if you are a property manager and you're listening to this, highly recommend reaching out to Jade. Like I said, I'm a marketing professional. I do marketing for property managers. She does sales for property managers. The thing is, there's lots of agencies out there. There's lots of salespeople out there. But Jade has had experience in the short-term rental space, pioneering the sales processes. Like, she knows how to talk to owners specifically. So there's really nobody else that I've seen that has the same capabilities that Jade has to help you close owners. So yeah, if you want to reach out to her, she's got a LinkedIn that she talked about. I will be putting her website as well in the links everywhere, wherever this is being posted to. So yeah, it's been a pleasure, Jade. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. It's always fun to talk shop. Let's do it again soon.